The story of Ruth is not just a tale of romance, but a journey of loyalty, redemption, and a divine purpose that transcends time. It begins in the dark days of famine, when Naomi, her husband Elimelech, and their 2 sons leave Bethlehem for Moab, a foreign land. Tragedy strikes. Naomi's husband dies, and then both her sons, leaving her and her 2 Moabite daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah, as widows. In this moment of immense grief and loss, Naomi urges them to return to their own people. Orpah leaves with a heavy heart, but Ruth clings to Naomi, making a declaration that has echoed through the centuries. "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God." This statement of unwavering commitment marks the beginning of one of the most beautiful love stories in the Bible. But it is not only a love story between a man and a woman. It is first a story of covenant loyalty between 2 women in the face of suffering. Ruth, a Moabite, chooses to follow the God of Israel and care for Naomi, not knowing what awaits her. They return to Bethlehem poor, grieving, and vulnerable. Yet Ruth does not complain. She goes to glean in the fields to provide food, humbly gathering leftover grain behind the harvesters, as allowed by Jewish law for the poor. It is in these fields that Ruth meets Boaz, a man of great character, honor, and kindness. Boaz takes notice of her hard work and selflessness. He provides protection, food, and favor, instructing his men to leave extra grain for her. Ruth's reputation precedes her. People have heard of her devotion to Naomi. Boaz is touched by her humility and faith. This isn't the kind of love born in a moment of passion. It's a love that grows from respect, sacrifice, and integrity. Naomi sees God's hand moving and urges Ruth to approach Boaz as a kinsman redeemer, someone with the legal right to marry her and preserve the family line. Ruth obeys and goes to Boaz in the night, humbly asking him to spread the corner of his garment over her, a cultural sign of protection and marriage. Boaz is deeply moved, but he also acts honorably. There is another closer relative who has first rights, and Boaz approaches the matter with full integrity, giving that man the option first. When that man declines, Boaz publicly redeems Ruth, marrying her and restoring Naomi's hope. Their union results in the birth of Obed, the grandfather of King David, and ultimately leads to the genealogy of Jesus Christ. From a story of sorrow and barrenness comes a legacy of royalty and redemption. Ruth, once a foreigner and outsider, becomes part of God's divine plan for salvation. Her life teaches us that God honors faith, humility, and loyalty, even when everything seems lost. She shows that true love is not just romantic. It is steadfast, selfless, and rooted in faith. The story of Ruth is beautiful not only because of the romance, but because it reveals God's heart. It reminds us that He sees our pain, guides our steps, and brings beauty out of ashes. Ruth's legacy lives on because she chose love when it was hardest. She followed the path of righteousness, and in doing so, became part of a story much greater than herself. Her love for Naomi, her respect for Boaz, and her faith in God make her one of the most inspiring women in Scripture. And through her life, we are reminded that no matter how broken our past may be, God can still write a beautiful future. Ruth's story begins with a choice. In the face of death, despair, and complete uncertainty, she chooses loyalty over logic, faith over fear, and love over self-interest. After losing her husband, Ruth stands at a crossroads. Naomi, her mother-in-law, gives her a way out, a return to her homeland, to her people, and to the safety of familiarity. Orpah, the other daughter-in-law, weeps and eventually chooses to go back. But Ruth refuses. Her words are not just a statement of attachment, but a vow of unbreakable devotion. She says to Naomi, "Do not urge me to leave you, or to return from following you. For where you go I will go, and where you stay I will stay. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." These words echo throughout history as one of the most powerful declarations of commitment ever spoken. Ruth doesn't just stay with Naomi. She binds herself to her in a covenant of love and loyalty. This moment is profoundly significant, not only for their personal journey, but also for the spiritual symbolism it carries. Ruth, a Moabite woman, was raised outside the covenant of Israel. Moabites were often regarded with suspicion and disdain by the Israelites, due to their historical enmity and idolatry. Ruth's decision to align herself with Naomi and the God of Israel is a complete turning point in her life. She isn't just pledging loyalty to her mother-in-law, she is renouncing her past, her people, and her old gods in exchange for a new identity rooted in faith. It is this spiritual transformation that makes her loyalty even more powerful. She is not just following Naomi because of affection. She is surrendering her entire future to the God she has come to trust. In a world where self-preservation is natural and survival instinct reigns, Ruth's loyalty stands out as extraordinary. She has no promise of security, no assurance of a better life, and no husband waiting for her in Bethlehem. What awaits her is an uncertain future in a land where she will be a foreigner, poor and vulnerable. Yet her love for Naomi compels her to take that risk. In doing so, she teaches an enduring lesson. Real love is not measured by what it gains, but by what it gives up. Ruth's loyalty is costly, but it is not blind. It is guided by a moral clarity that chooses faithfulness over ease, sacrifice over safety. When Ruth and Naomi arrive in Bethlehem, the city is stirred, but their condition is dire. Naomi even says, "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." But Ruth doesn't flinch. She goes straight to work, gleaning in the fields during the harvest to provide for them both. This act of humble labor further reveals her character. She is not waiting for a miracle. She becomes the miracle through her dedication. Her loyalty is not only expressed in emotional words, but in daily actions. Her devotion to Naomi does not fade with time or hardship, it deepens. It is in the field that Ruth's character catches the attention of Boaz. He hears about her loyalty, her hard work, and her gentle spirit. He sees the evidence of her integrity, and he is moved to show her kindness and protection. Ruth's faithfulness also impacts Naomi. The woman who once called herself bitter begins to hope again. Ruth becomes a vessel of God's love and provision to Naomi. Her unwavering loyalty acts as a healing balm to Naomi's broken spirit, where Naomi had once believed that God had turned against her. Through Ruth's love and actions, she begins to see His hand again. This kind of loyalty doesn't just hold someone up, it lifts them out of despair. It doesn't just stay near, it walks alongside through the darkest valleys. Ruth's story teaches that true love is rooted in commitment, not convenience. It doesn't walk away when things get hard. It doesn't demand explanations or assurances. It simply stays, works, and believes. Ruth could have chosen the easier path. She could have returned to her homeland, remarried, and lived comfortably. But she didn't. Her decision to stay with Naomi changed the course of history. What she couldn't have known is that her choice would make her part of the lineage of King David, and eventually Jesus Christ. Her loyalty wasn't just a personal virtue. It was a thread in the grand tapestry of God's redemptive plan. We live in a world that often values instant results, short-term relationships, and personal gain. Ruth stands in contrast as a timeless example of what it means to be loyal through pain, committed through uncertainty, and faithful without knowing the outcome. Her story reminds us that the impact of love and loyalty can extend far beyond what we see. The choice to stand by someone, to care for them in their weakness, to walk with them in their sorrow. These are choices that echo in eternity. Ruth's love was not driven by romance or reward. It was grounded in truth, sacrifice, and covenant. Ruth's example challenges us to examine our own relationships. Are we the kind of people who stay only when it's easy? Do we offer support only when it's convenient? Or do we reflect the kind of loyalty that God honors? The kind that stays, serves, and surrenders. Ruth's love was tested in the fires of loss and uncertainty, yet it remained pure. And because she chose loyalty, she was not only blessed with a new family and a loving husband, but she became part of a divine legacy. Her story ultimately reflects the heart of God. Just as Ruth clung to Naomi, so does God remain faithful to his people. Just as Ruth made a covenant of love, so does God extend his covenant to all who trust in him. Her loyalty mirrors the very character of God, steadfast, unshakable, and full of grace. In the end, Ruth was not only redeemed, but honored. Her name is remembered, her legacy preserved, and her love celebrated as one of the most beautiful ever told in Scripture. And all of it began with one simple, yet profound decision to stay. The story of Ruth is one of divine orchestration, where human faithfulness meets God's sovereign plan. At the center of this unfolding drama is the concept of redemption, not just in a legal sense, but in a deeply spiritual and relational one. Boaz, a man of noble character, plays the pivotal role of the kinsman redeemer, a concept rooted in ancient Hebrew law. According to this law, a close relative had the responsibility to redeem a family member in distress, particularly widows, by marrying them and ensuring the continuation of the family line. Ruth, a Moabite widow, finds herself gleaning in the fields of Boaz, unaware that he is both related to her late husband and possesses the moral and legal ability to redeem her and restore her life. What begins as an act of survival, gathering grain in a stranger's field, unfolds into a carefully guided path toward divine redemption. Boaz notices Ruth, not because of her beauty or status, but because of her integrity, her commitment to Naomi, and her humble spirit. He inquires about her and is moved by the reports of her selfless loyalty. He immediately extends kindness to her, instructing his workers to leave extra grain and to protect her. This moment marks the beginning of Ruth's redemption, where the favor of Boaz mirrors the grace of God, reaching down to restore what was lost. Boaz's actions are not motivated by obligation alone. They flow from a heart that recognizes virtue and responds with generosity. He praises Ruth for seeking refuge under the wings of the God of Israel and offers her more than just physical safety. He offers her dignity. Ruth, in turn, responds with humility and gratitude, acknowledging his kindness as a comfort to her soul. As the harvest continues, Ruth remains in Boaz's fields, and Naomi begins to see the hand of God in their situation. Naomi, once filled with bitterness, now sees the possibility of joy and restoration. She guides Ruth to take a bold and culturally significant step, approaching Boaz on the threshing floor and asking him to fulfill his role as kinsman redeemer. This moment is not seductive or manipulative, it is deeply respectful and symbolic. Ruth uncovers Boaz's feet and lies down, a traditional gesture of submission and request for protection. When Boaz awakens, Ruth makes a heartfelt plea. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, for you are a redeemer." Boaz is both touched and honored by her request. He praises her for not chasing after younger men and acknowledges her as a woman of noble character. However, Boaz knows there is another man who has a closer claim to Ruth. He does not act hastily or selfishly. Instead, he goes to the town gate, the place of legal matters, and presents the case before the elders. This moment reflects Boaz's deep integrity. He is not only willing to redeem Ruth, but determined to do it the right way. The other man declines, unwilling to risk his own inheritance, and Boaz joyfully redeems Ruth in the presence of witnesses. He declares his intention to marry her and to raise up the name of the dead through their union. This public declaration seals Ruth's redemption, not only legally but socially and spiritually. She is no longer a foreign widow gleaning in the fields. She is now the wife of a respected man, the heir to a future, and part of the covenant community of Israel. This act of redemption is more than a marriage. It is a powerful illustration of how God works through human relationships to fulfill His divine purposes. Boaz's role points forward to the ultimate Redeemer, Jesus Christ, who would come generations later through the very line established by Ruth and Boaz. Just as Boaz redeems Ruth, Jesus redeems humanity, taking on the cost, acting with righteousness, and restoring our place in the family of God. The story of Ruth shows that redemption often comes through ordinary means. There are no miracles or supernatural interventions, only faithful people making godly choices. Boaz did not have to redeem Ruth, just as Christ was not forced to redeem us. It was an act of willing love, driven by compassion and guided by righteousness. Ruth did not earn her redemption. She received it by grace. Her heart, however, had already been prepared by her faith and loyalty. Redemption in Ruth's story is deeply relational. It involves love, trust, and commitment. It brings together not only Ruth and Boaz, but also restores Naomi. The child born from their union, Obed, is seen as a gift not only to Ruth but to Naomi, who had lost everything. Naomi holds the child in her arms, and the women of the town say, "Naomi has a son." This is the fullness of redemption, not just restoring the individual, but restoring the community. It turns sorrow into joy, emptiness into fullness, and despair into hope. Ruth's journey from a foreign land to the heart of God's redemptive plan shows how faith and obedience open the door for divine providence to work. Even in her lowest moment, Ruth remained faithful, and God honored her with a future she could not have imagined. Through Boaz's kindness, integrity, and willingness to fulfill his role, Ruth receives a new identity, a new family, and a new destiny. The story concludes not with personal triumph, but with generational impact. Ruth becomes the great-grandmother of King David, from whose line the Messiah would come. Her life, once marked by loss and exclusion, becomes a cornerstone of God's salvation history. The beauty of Ruth's redemption is that it mirrors the gospel. We, like Ruth, are outsiders, broken by sin, and in need of grace. Jesus, like Boaz, sees us, loves us, and redeems us, not because we are worthy, but because He is full of mercy. He pays the price, restores our name, and brings us into the family of God. The story of Ruth is quiet yet profound. It moves through fields, kitchens, and city gates, not palaces or battlefields, yet its impact reaches eternity. It shows us that redemption is not just a theological concept, but a lived experience born out of daily faithfulness, courageous love, and godly obedience. Boaz didn't just rescue Ruth, he honored her. He didn't just fulfill a duty, he embraced a calling. In doing so, he becomes a model of Christ-like love, one that sees, protects, and uplifts. Ruth's redemption is not accidental. It is divinely designed. Her faith led her to the right field. Her character attracted the right man, and her humility opened the way for her full restoration. Every step of the way, God was weaving a story of grace through the threads of obedience and love. Her life reminds us that redemption is always possible, no matter where we start. When we trust God, remain faithful in small things, and walk in integrity, we position ourselves to receive His favor and be part of something far greater than ourselves. Ruth's journey from brokenness to blessing is one of the most powerful transformations in all of Scripture. When the story begins, Ruth is a widow in a foreign land, grieving the loss of her husband and living with her equally broken mother-in-law, Naomi. Everything about her life screams of loss, sorrow, and uncertainty. She is a Moabite, which means she is considered an outsider to Israel, a people group with whom the Israelites have a complicated and often hostile history. She has no status, no wealth, and no guaranteed future. She leaves behind her homeland, her culture, and everything familiar to journey with Naomi to Bethlehem, simply because of her love and loyalty. The magnitude of this step cannot be overstated. She chooses to walk into the unknown, not knowing if she will be accepted or if she will even survive. She chooses to embrace Naomi's people and Naomi's God, forsaking her past for a future she cannot see. This is not just an emotional act, but a spiritual one. It is an act of faith, a declaration that her story is not over, and that her identity will no longer be defined by loss or despair. When Ruth arrives in Bethlehem, the women of the town are stirred, but she remains quiet and focused. Naomi, overwhelmed by grief, tells them to call her Mara, meaning bitter, because she feels that the Lord has dealt harshly with her. But Ruth doesn't complain. Instead, she takes initiative. She offers to go out and glean in the fields during the harvest so they can have food. Gleaning was a provision made in the law for the poor, the widows, and the strangers, those who had no land or livelihood. Ruth steps into this humble role without hesitation. She doesn't know where she will end up or how people will treat her, but she moves forward anyway. In this simple act of labor, God begins to move. She finds herself in the field of Boaz, a wealthy and honorable man from the clan of Elimelech, Naomi's late husband. It may seem like coincidence, but it is clearly divine orchestration. Ruth's decision to step out in faith brings her into alignment with God's plan. Boaz notices Ruth and inquires about her. He learns of her story, how she left everything to stay with Naomi, and how hard she has been working in the fields. His heart is touched. Instead of treating her like a foreigner or a beggar, he extends favor and kindness. He ensures her safety, instructs his men not to harm her, and even tells her to stay close to his female workers. He allows her to drink from the water jars his men have filled and invites her to eat them during meal times. Ruth is overwhelmed by his generosity and humility. She falls to her knees and asks why he would show such kindness to a foreigner. Boaz replies that he has heard of everything she has done for Naomi, and that she has sought refuge under the wings of the God of Israel. This moment is a turning point. Ruth, who once stood at the margins, is now seen, valued, and protected. Her past did not disqualify her. Her heart made room for grace. As the story unfolds, Naomi begins to hope again. She sees that God has not forgotten them and encourages Ruth to seek out Boaz as a potential redeemer. Ruth obeys and follows Naomi's instructions with humility and courage. She approaches Boaz at the threshing floor, asking him to cover her with the corner of his garment. a symbolic act of requesting marriage and protection. Boaz is moved and responds with honor. He praises her for her loyalty and her virtue, and although there is a closer relative who technically has the first right to redeem her, Boaz promises to settle the matter honestly and quickly. The next day, he meets with the elders at the city gate, lays out the situation, and when the other relative declines to redeem Ruth, Boaz gladly steps in front of the town's leaders. He redeems the land of Elimelech and marries Ruth, sealing her place in the covenant community of Israel. The blessing that follows is extraordinary. Ruth and Boaz are united in marriage, and the Lord blesses their union with a son named Obed. This child is more than just a baby. He represents restoration, continuity, and divine favor. For Naomi, who had lost everything, Obed is a tangible sign that God has not abandoned her. The women of the town declare that Naomi is blessed and that Ruth, her daughter-in-law who loves her, is better to her than 7 sons. Naomi, once bitter and empty, now holds new life in her arms. Through Ruth's faith, humility, and obedience, the cycle of loss is broken, and the family line is restored. The transformation is complete. Ruth, who began as a grieving foreign widow, becomes the honored wife of a nobleman, the mother of a child who will carry on the family name, and the great-grandmother of King David. Her legacy does not end with her personal blessings. It extends into the royal lineage of Israel and ultimately to the birth of Jesus Christ. Her story proves that brokenness is not the end. In God's hands, broken pieces are not discarded. They are restored and woven into something glorious. Ruth's journey from brokenness to blessing is not just about a change in circumstances, but a revelation of character. She remains humble when elevated, faithful when honored, and grateful when blessed. She doesn't let her past define her or her losses paralyze her. Instead, she walks forward with quiet strength and deep trust. Her life speaks to all who feel forgotten, unworthy, or uncertain. It tells us that our origin does not determine our destiny, that sorrow is not the end of the story, and that when we align ourselves with God, He can do more with our lives than we ever imagined. Ruth's story encourages us to believe that God sees us even in our lowest moments. He is not absent in our pain. He is working, even in the background, preparing fields of favor and opening doors we didn't know existed. What begins as a season of famine and death ends in abundance and life. Ruth teaches us that transformation does not come through striving, but through surrender. Her life is not about chasing after blessings, but about being faithful in the little things. And in her faithfulness, God writes a story that generations will remember. This transformation from brokenness to blessing is not reserved for Ruth alone. It is a picture of what God desires to do in every willing heart. No matter how deep the sorrow, how distant the hope, or how unlikely the future, God can restore, redeem, and bless. Ruth's life, once marked by mourning, becomes a testimony of mercy. Her name, once unknown, is now spoken with honor, and her legacy, born out of loyalty and faith, continues to inspire all who seek beauty from ashes.